Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Board of Supervisors meeting for Calaveras County. At this time, Madam Clerk.
Okay. Pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6, Personnel Matter, conference with Labor Negotiator Judy Hawkins, Director of Human Resources and Risk Management, regarding Deputy Sheriff's Association, Sheriff's Management Unit, Service Employees International Union, and Calaveras County Public Safety Employees Association negotiations.
Okay, is there any public comment on this agendized item? This will be a closed session item. Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Item 2, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation. One case pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9 D2.
Okay, is there any public comment on this agendized item on the closed session agenda? Seeing none, we'll adjourn to closed session. We're going to be back in about. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Board of Supervisors meeting for Calaveras County. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Supervisor Clapp, would you lead us, please? Madam Clerk?
Report of closed session, item number 1, pursuant to Government Code Section
Thank you, folks.
Pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6, Personnel Matter, conference with Labor Negotiator Judy Hawkins, Director of Human Resources and Risk Management, regarding Deputy Sheriff's Association, Sheriff's Management Unit, Service Employees International Union, and Calaveras County Public Safety Employees Association negotiations. Board action. There's no reportable action taken. Item number 2, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation, pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9 D2. This item will remain open through today's agenda. There was no reportable action taken during this morning's initial discussion on this item.
Thank you. Is there any announcements by staff or by board members? Seeing none? Madam Clerk.
Public comment. Any item of interest to the public that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board and is not posted on the consent or regular agendas may be addressed during the public comment period. California law prohibits the board from taking action on any matter which is not posted on the agenda unless it is determined to be an emergency by the Board of Supervisors. If public comment is completed before the 30-minute allotted time period, the board may immediately move to the next order of business. If public comment is not completed during the allotted time period, it will be continued as the last item of business in order to provide an opportunity for the remainder of comments to be heard.
Thank you. Okay, everyone. This is a general public comment period. This is a time to bring up any topic that is not on today's agenda. There will be another item-specific public comment period for those agendized items, and for any items pulled from the consent agenda. So if you're here to talk about a topic or an item that is on today's agenda, for instance, our ordinances and things that are on the regular agenda, this is not the time to make a public comment. You'll have that opportunity when we address that specific agendized item. I want to remind everybody of the respect that this chamber, the respect for the board and staff, and the respect for you, the public, while you're here. Today is going to be a very involved meeting. And I want everybody to understand that I will be very tolerant of the ability to speak your mind. But I will not condone any disrespect, any name-calling, or any action that will cause you to be removed from this chamber, which I will do. Once we set the ground rules, I'm sure we're going to have a very productive meeting. And I know that in the past, everybody has performed remarkably. I hope that will continue. Thank you. Sir?
Good morning, Joel Pitto, Paloma, Gwynn Mine Road. Still, after almost a year, is unrepaired, unsafe, and people are using it anyway. Somebody's going to go in the creek. They went in the creek a couple hundred yards down on my property a few weeks ago. Rather bad crash. Why I have a bee under my bonnet on this subject is I took two previous public works directors down there and showed them the spot that is caved in before it caved in, and I told them why it's going to cave in again, and the county did nothing. The county has continued to do nothing. I'm trying to market my property and trying to get the Gwynn mine reopened. And the fact that I cannot take any prospective buyer down there because it shows deep disrespect by the county to the property is a little disturbing to me. Mr. Krovitz, I started to slam a little bit last time, and I want to apologize for that because the man has taken a lot of time to keep me informed, to be polite, and to do things that are not always happening in this county. He's a good man, and I don't believe the responsibility lies with him. I've been told that he came and asked for the board to endorse an emergency resolution to get this road fixed, and you guys did nothing. That's sad. Also, last time I spoke a month ago, I gave a really impassioned, to me, speech about free speech. And I did not give credit to the person that wrote that speech. And I wish I was clever enough to have done it, but it was spoken by Mario Savio in the steps of UC Berkeley Sproul Hall, 1964. It was the speech that started the free speech movement. There'll be times today when people are tried, and I do hope, Mr. Oliveira, that you are flexible to the point that you accommodate more free speech than has been allowed. I think sometimes clapping is perfectly appropriate and entitled as rights of a citizen. So please, board, and please, Mr. Lutz, who nobody's picked on because we gave you some time to get adapted to in this county. Could you look into the situation on Gwynn Mine Road? It's a key emergency evacuation road that has been used a half a dozen times in the last year. And it should not be allowed to be the last item to be dealt with by this county.
Thank you, Mr. Peter.
Thank you.
Good morning, Ms. Newman.
Good morning, Bonnie Newman from Devil Springs. Did anyone get up early enough to see the sunrise this morning? It was beautiful, really colorful. There's a saying, red skies at morning, sailors take warning. We may have some rocky seas ahead. I'm coming today to share with you a story I just heard. My friend's sister and husband returned from a tour in Europe, so many countries in so many days, and they said it was strange. Every country they visited except one, people approached them and questioned them about what's wrong with America. And they found themselves defending, I didn't vote for him. And they said the worst place was in England, where they were almost harassed. And they got real defensive, and they finally had to say, it's not all of our fault. Please forgive us. They left feeling either like they were a laughing stock or people were pitying them. And so It's just something to keep in mind how the common man across the world is viewing America or Americans at this point. And so I just like to say, as we make decisions, we know everything we do affects everyone else. We want to have the best examples to be set because we've had quite a history to represent. And finally, because I always bring words to define, my word for today is collusion. It means a secret agreement for a fraudulent or illegal purpose, a conspiracy, a planning or acting together secretly and usually for a nefarious purpose. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Newman. Good morning.
Good morning. Give me just a second. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry that I'm shaking. I really hate being in the public spotlight. My name is Sam Santry. My ancestors have fought for freedom in this country for 12 generations. This shit means something to me. The fact that our government has become so perverse that so much time has been wasted on a God-given plant is disgusting. It's literally disgusting. And the fact that that poor man can't get his road fixed because we're in here every day arguing about a plant, you people disgust me. And I had a whole thing prepared, but that road thing really irritated me. You people should be ashamed. And these pop people, they're victims. They're your victims. You understand that? The only reason they're not victims is because you made them criminals. But you're their
Sir,
oppressors.
you're on the edge here, okay?
That's fine. I'm going home.
Thank you for your service.
I'm tired of this.
Bye-bye.
And I'm tired of watching this.
Hi, you guys. Good morning.
Morning.
Happy holidays. My name is Danielle Maxwell. I reside in Avery, and this is my son,
Say
JJ Benoit.
right.
I'm here today before you guys, my local government. My son is going to be, how old are you going to be?
I got 17 years old.
And where do you go to school?
Got
By heart.
Yeah, and go huh?
yes.
All right.
Go for fast.
So I moved to this county because I want a better life for me and my son. I'm a single parent. JJ was diagnosed with hydrocephalus, Vater syndrome, CVI, nystagmus. He's missing his right kidney, right radial bone, and we are now currently dealing with epilepsy.
Never glad.
I have been his caregiver 24/7. Proud to be. My son's a blessing to me. With that being said, when I moved to this county, in-home support services are ran a little bit different than the county I came from. The county I came from, I was trained in bloodborne pathogens, CPR, and universal precautions. We also had health care that was not a lottery. We did not have to wait on a waiting list. The health care that's being provided, I am considered a Calaveras County worker, is Symetra. Nobody knows who this is, and it's a smoking gun because it doesn't even qualify for the Obama qualifications, so I still get taxed at the end of the year or fined. I was a cash paying patient because of this, and I was waiting on the lottery for in-home support services. During that time, my son receives his own money, SSI. I'm his payee, along with those in-home support services hours. When I walk into this county and I request some medical help because of some serious stuff, which I had thyroid surgery this January, I am told that I have a $1,400 share of cost because JJ is his own entity and is considered his own person, and I don't have any other dependents, and I walk into that county on paper as a single woman with his monies, so I do not qualify. $1,400 share cost, I cannot afford. I'm on a fixed income. It is easier for me to be a cash-paying patient and get the discounts and shop around for my biopsies, my iodine, my ultrasounds, my pap smears, my mammograms.
Thank you, ma'am. Your time is up.
If I may share,
Unfortunately, no. We have a 3-minute time limit. Thank
I'm
you.
sorry, I thought it was 10, otherwise I would have,
It's only 3. Thank you.
okay. So where do I go from this? Who do I speak with and follow up? Because my premiums are now
Ma'am,
going up 29% from
I'm gonna recommend you
141 a month
contact-
to 569.
Ma'am, I'm going to recommend you contact county offices and
I
they'll be
have,
able.
and I have.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we can't discuss it during this time.
Okay, so should I come
Thank you.
back
Thank
when
you.
we have
Next
more
speaker.
time?
Yes, sir.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning. How are you, Mr. Wilson?
Disappointed, frustrated. Did you all happen to see a little TV show called 60 Minutes this weekend, where there's a company called McKesson? They're the largest supplier of opioids in the United States. You know, I made a call to them after they were fined $150 million when they make $100 million a day. And under the name Peaceful Valley Home for Cancer Patients, I was able to obtain from them a promise of 4,000 Oxycontin a month after they've been fined, without a prescription, without being a registered pharmacist. And that's here in Calaveras County. Their home is in San Francisco. That's pretty disgusting. They're too big to prosecute, according to the DEA. I also forwarded that information to them, and they said they were working on that problem. They sent to a pharmacy in Colorado enough for 400 pills for every person in that city per day, or per month, excuse me, not per day. And we sit here contemplating how to end 500 legal tax-paying businesses that only signed up to get state licensing today. And you gentlemen have wasted a year sitting there, going over this problem, going around this problem, avoiding this problem. Yes, I'm disappointed and I'm disgusted with you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning,
Good
Dina
morning, Ms.
Morris.
Morris.
I just wanted to say that I've been working with code compliance for a couple of years on several issues, and I've been up here saying many times that I've gotten a lot of responses but no results. And I want to say that last week I saw some results. So I wanted to thank Ed Short and his team. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Morris.
Ben Stopper, District 5.
Good morning, Mr. Stopper.
It's been a long year.
Yes.
I can't say it hasn't been interesting in a lot of different ways. Coming up this next year, we got some things coming up that are very important for our community as a whole that we get finished. The general plan, EIR, should be close to being done. I'm not sure exactly the timeline on it, but this is essential to our community moving forward, not just economically, but retaining water rights and many other state factors as we move forward. So I hope we can raise our eyes, look to the future, come together as a board, and get this done, because we have been waiting on this general plan for far too long. There have been many issues from both sides. Do I think this one that was worked on last year is absolutely perfect? I don't think one will ever be perfect, because we cannot always meet the needs of everyone. But it is called a general plan for one reason. It's general. We have the opportunity to move forward in the future and make amendments to the general plan. And we need to keep our eyes on it, and we need to get it done. Because if we wait too long, we're going to lose more to the state in the future. Keep that in mind, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning, Mr.
Michael
Mulcahy.
Falvey, District 2. I, like Mr. Wilson, did watch that program on 60 Minutes on McKesson. I'm sure you're all familiar. You've at least heard the name McKesson. I think you ought to get together with Dr. Dean Kaleta, I believe is the head of the county's medical field, and cease all dealings with McKesson. They are feeding the addiction of the opioid crisis, and they're doing it with the full consent of our government, our federal government. And it was disgusting to see what they're getting away with in the name of profit for their shareholders and their executive officers. It's ridiculous. It's sickening to an American citizen. They're the biggest contributors to the drug opioid epidemic in this country, and you, as a board, should cease dealing with them. They're evil. I'm sure they have some programs with the county where because they have the ins. There must be some contracts that our medical departments have with McKesson obtaining prescription drugs. You ought to look into that and cut McKesson out of this county, because they're worse than any problem anybody sitting in this room. They're much worse, and yet they all wear suits and ties and walk right into our living rooms, walk right into here, and are welcome with open arms. That's wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning. Raymond Smith. I'm from Valley Springs, District 1. I'd like to bring our attention to the American flag over here. This is information from AmericanLegion.com. According to custom and tradition, the white signifies purity and innocence, the red hardiness and valor, the blue signifies vigilance, perseverance, and justice. Rarely in history do people have the opportunity to change its course and have profound impact on people's lives. Above all else, have the opportunity to save those lives. We expect those in service to serve, not be a disservice to veterans who we know are dying at a rate of 22 a day by suicide alone. Veterans also die at a rate of 50% greater of accidental overdose than civilians do. Over-medication is the #1 killer in the United States. It is no longer car accidents. I'd like to bring that to your attention. The #1 killer in the United States is accidental overdose. I hope that resonates with you, because we can prevent that here today by allowing people over 21, patients and their caregivers, access to reasonable regulations to a product which isn't going to kill them. Thank you very much. I wish you continued health and happiness. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you.
Good morning. Trent Fiorino, District 1. Also want to point attention to the flag. We all stood and said the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag this morning. And one of the things we do is we pledge allegiance to the Republic. This is not a democracy. It's a republic. What that means is that we as voters elect people to represent us. And we expect them to represent us. In my district, we elected Gary Toffanelli to represent us on an issue that will come up, and I won't go into that because we're not there yet. But it was a referendum on that, and that's how he got elected. and all of you know how this county feels. Because if you did, you know our vote's been taken away many times on the issue that's going to come up later. And why has that happened? Excuse me, can I?
Sir, address the board, please.
You know what the public feels, and I'm just asking that you represent us. You know what our opinion is. You know what your district wants. You've heard from your district. And I'm asking you today to stand up and represent us. Thank you.
Point of order. He's talking about the issue, saying he's not talking about the issue.
Yeah, your point of order, ma'am, is out of order. Next speaker? Next public speaker?
Good morning, Chairman Oliveira and fellow supervisors. My name is George Fry. I'm in District 1. I live here in San Andreas. How many of you saw 60 Minutes, board members? How many of you saw the 60-minute thing about McKesson? Did anybody see it? It's on the board? Okay, well, I saw it. A 30-year DEA agent in management, a man, and a 29-year veteran of the DEA, a woman, tried to get the attorneys for the DEA to take on McKesson, and the attorneys would not do it. It's amazing to me that we live in a country where we can't even get the people who are employed in the federal government to do their job. It's absolutely amazing what McKesson has gotten away with. I've been watching McKesson for several years, along with some other large drug companies. I hope you look into it. I hope you talk to Dr. Kaleda. I hope you can do whatever legally you possibly can do, but we can't continue to have pharmaceutical companies ruling for us and us not wanting what they're doing. It's a failure of our government, our federal government, not to do something about it. And it's sad and disappointing to me that this pharmaceutical company, which is the second largest pharmaceutical company in the United States, gets away with all of this. I'm reminded of Speaker of the House Tip O'Neill's statement that all politics is local. So I hope that you as politicians will do something about this issue. Bring it to the attention of the Attorney General of California and see if we can't get this resolved, because they are the biggest suppliers of opiate drugs.
Thank you, Mr. Fry.
Just a reminder, those people standing in the back need to find a seat, please.
Good morning, Mr. Thomas.
Good morning. My name is Russ Thomas. I'm a resident of District 4. And I just want to kind of tag up with Ben Stopper's comments about the general plan. I was part of the problem, I guess, with this general plan years ago. It started before I was on the Board of Supervisors, and it continued during the time that I was on the Board of Supervisors. And here we are, a couple of terms later, and still nothing has happened. I want to suggest a better way to handle it in the future. But when I was a resident of Stanislaus County, I was on the Planning Commission down there, and in that county, they have a standing committee called the General Plan Advisory Committee that is comprised of 2 members of the Planning Commission, 2 members of the Board of Supervisors. And at the moment that a general plan is adopted, they begin working on an element of the general plan that they deem might need attention sooner than later. So they never find themselves in a position where the general plan is entirely out of date, and the argument can be made that you can't approve or you can't even listen to this application because this application is contrary to the provisions in your general plan. And you all know that there have been projects that have been denied without prejudice because they're not in compliance with the general plan. Well, I would suggest to you that as soon as your general plan is adopted, that you immediately set up an ad hoc committee called the General Plan Advisory Committee so that you don't get yourself caught in this chasing your tail every 20 years where you have to come back and start a 12 to 15-year process where everything stops. It's a terrible situation that we have all allowed ourselves to get into, where good projects either get denied or developers get frustrated that they have no chance they perceive that there's no chance of getting anything moving forward because of this the county council saying we can't approve this because our general plan is not current. So anyway, just a suggestion, look at other counties that use this methodology, and I would hope that in the future that we do a better job because the citizens deserve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Good morning.
Hi. Drugs are drugs. It doesn't matter what the name of it is, they are drugs. They cause a lot of problems in our society. And the same set of problems comes with each and every drug. And I'm really sorry that Americans are willing to give up their freedom for drugs. I'm sorry that law enforcement, all the way up to the top, are afraid of the people who want drugs because they want the money from the drugs, and they want the American people to lose their freedom.
Thank you. Any further public speakers?
Good morning.
Morning.
Members of the board. My name is Bob Reeve. I live in Valley Springs, California. I would just share my observations that I've seen a noted change with the commercialization of cannabis in this county that was not here prior. And it's a matter of concern. I see it in two ways. It's bothered me. I see people down in Marvell's parking lot sleeping all night there that just have no means of support and are just hanging around. One of them was caught sleeping up behind our church here in San Andreas, just a vagrant. The second thing that bothers me is a young fellow decided he was going to make a lot of money, and he grew a lot of marijuana, and he drove back to Chicago to sell it because he could make a lot more money back there. In the process, he was...
Sir, I believe we're speaking to an agendized item on the regular agenda as far as ordinance review and drafts and things.
I would just ask that the board give considerable thought to controlling.
I understand, but that could be reserved for public comment during that agenda item.
All right, very good. Great, thanks.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Joan Wilson, District 1. I just wanted to tell you guys, you know what? This is a fantastic county. Not necessarily the people in it, not necessarily the people that run it, but this is a fantastic county. Do you know why? Because doing some research, because I keep hearing how crime has gone up in this county, doing my research, I found that this is one of the safest counties in the nation to live in. There's barely any crime here. At best, the crime is only what is normal in the nation, and that's only in 2 items. Other than that, We live in a fantastic county. It's beautiful. The weather is great. It's wonderful climate. And you know what? We have almost no crime. And that says a lot, because I remember back in the 70s and the 80s, there were signs up, report crime, because people were getting robbed in their houses. It's not happening today. You might want to think about why. Thank you, and have a great day, sirs.
Thank you,
Mr. Chair, that was the last speaker for 30 minutes.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, that was our last speaker for our 30-minute time period for public comment. We will resume public comment after the regular agenda items have been heard and decided. So, at this time, Madam Clerk.
Consent agenda items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. They will be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member, staff member, or interested party may request removal of an item from the consent agenda for later discussion.
Is there any member of the public that wishes an item pulled from the consent agenda only? Yes, would you stand up, Ms. Newman? And what item?
Number 6, number 8.
Number 6 and number 8. Any other item from the public on the consent agenda? Seeing none, staff, any item to be pulled?
Yes, we need to also pull item 5.
Item 5. Any Board of Supervisor member wish any items pulled from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion for the balance of the consent agenda.
Mr. Chair, I would move the balance.
Moved by Supervisor Toffenelli,
I'll second it.
second by Supervisor Mills. Any further public comment on this particular consent agenda item? Hearing none, I'll bring it back to the board for a vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed indicate by saying no. Hearing none, motion carries 5-0, unanimous. Madam Clerk?
Item number 5 is from the Administrative Office. Adopt a resolution authorizing the Auditor Controller to release funds pursuant to 3.56.130C6 orders of an Administrative Hearing Officer, or 3.56.150 determination by the tax collector that overpayment has been made.
Good morning, Brian Moss, Administrative Office. And this item was pulled as a result of some additional funds that we determined needed to be added to the financing section of your packet. I distributed that to Robin this morning, and you may have that in front of you right now. I'm just going to read that for the public. There are copies here of the agenda item should anybody wish to have one. Specifically, the current economic impact to county general funds due to redetermination of taxes is now $55,320. Okay, that is a change from the original packet stating $28,700, and I'll explain that in a few minutes. However, it's anticipated that there may be additional redeterminations in the future. As such, the overall economic impact is unknown at this time. Further, to the above referenced sections of the Calaveras County Code, the Auditor Controller requires authorization to release funds currently known to be due, as well as refunds due in connection with future redeterminations. Staff will be returning to the board to adopt a budget dedicated solely to cannabis tax redetermination and reimbursements associated with funds collected in 2016, 2017, and funds to be collected in the future. Primarily what the change is, we had 3 redeterminations that were submitted as part of that $28,000 and some change. We also had a clerical error that took place, and an individual paid his taxes, but the taxes were due, as I understand it, because this person had been denied and apparently was not growing. So with that said, that added the additional $26,622, and that really was $22,000 plus plus additional funds in penalties. So with that said, I'm requesting the board authorize the auditor controller and authorize this resolution so that people that either have redeterminations or should there be any what we call overpayments, that's as close as we could get under Title 3.56, that they be allowed to be reimbursed of funds either as done by the hearing officer, as done in the administrative office as redeterminations, and or should there be an issue like we had with this clerical error.
Thank you, Mr. Moss.
Thank you.
Any comments, discussion by staff or board members? Hearing none, is there any public comment on this agendized item? Hearing none, we'll bring it back to the board for a vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
So moved.
Oh, I'm sorry, we need a motion. I'll call for a motion then.
So moved.
It's moved by Supervisor Garamendi,
Second.
second by Supervisor Toffenelli. Any public comment on that motion? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote again. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed indicate by saying no. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Moss.
Thank you very much.
Madam Clerk?
Item number 6, the Administrative Office adopt a resolution continuing a local state of emergency on tree mortality.
Ms. Newman?
Thank you. I had the pleasure of taking a tour with Mr. Moss last week and had a chance to look at some of the beetle damaged wood, and also learned a little bit about the mill or the sawing that's going on up at Red Hill. And I was also in touch with a friend of mine who retired right before the Butte fire with a $30,000 nest egg, thinking she'd be okay for a while, and come to find out she had to spend it all to have 17 giant trees on her property taken down after the fire. Now she's looking at some bark beetle wood that she doesn't have the money to pay anyone. If we could get some money somewhere, and this would be up to you to be creative, to purchase whatever mill they have up at Red Hill, or allow that mill to do more than their Tier 1 and Tier 2 trees that they're being allowed to mill, maybe the people that have to have the trees removed could benefit from having those trees removed. Maybe they could have the wood, or they could sell the wood. But it's just hit after hit for these people that are already looking at poverty, dealing with whether it's the fire or the beetles, and knowing, it kills me when I hear the woods being chipped up somewhere, and, you know, I mean, there's lumber. And to me, it's a resource that we need to explore every avenue so that we don't bankrupt our citizens. We have some way of recouping some of the damages. And there must be a way to expand the opportunity for people to get a little money off of their property. They're cutting down the trees. First of all, that's going to kill them to see all their beautiful scenery gone, and then to know that they also have to deplete their I'm just thinking, I'm not sure if it's number 6 or number 8. That's why I pulled them both, because I'm not sure if that mill is doing Butte fire wood or it's doing the beetle wood. But somehow these two things need to come together, and we need to provide for our citizens that have just been bankrupt by the devastation that this county suffered. And I think if we could be creative and think of where we might get some money to purchase whatever's already set up, if it's owned by the Department of Forestry or whoever owns it, it's still in our county, it's still our wood, and we need to serve our citizens better, if possible.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Newman. Is Mr. Moss still available? I don't
might be
believe
able
he
to answer that question for her, actually.
Go ahead, Mr. Lutz.
I mean, it is bark beetle wood that's going into, and it's at the conservation camp in Vallecito. And to Ms. Newman's point, I think one of the things we've been looking at is opportunities to reclaim that wood where we can. I think with the help of Patrick, our building and grounds manager, we've been rehabilitating all of the picnic benches on the campus and adding some new ones. He's working on plans to have like a new podium done, again with the goal of trying to capture as much of that wood as we can and put it to productive use. There are limits on that wood in terms of it can't be used for anything structural, as in building a house, but it can be used for decorations or for, furniture that isn't supporting something that would be considered structural.
And I understand that wood could be available to private nonprofits or other agencies that might benefit from having something like that. But I'm still talking about people, private people, that are, it's costing them dearly to have this wood removed. And I heard last week that the contractor that takes the wood down, that becomes his wood because he's putting in the effort. But we've got to find a way. Maybe they can split the wood with the homeowner or something. There just seems to be something we ought to be able to do to address the needs of these people that are literally going bankrupt trying to clean up after this devastation.
I think it's a good question that we can work with the parties and stakeholders and see if there's an opportunity here and report back on what we find out.
I'm most grateful. Thank you.
Yeah. Ms. Newman, there are programs in place to address the tree mortality problem throughout the state of California. Understand that those programs are extending nationwide now. There are avenues and vehicles that we can use to get some type of reimbursement for the private lot owners that have been victims of the tree mortality program due to the bark beetle. Through the CDAA funding, through CAL FIRE, and through our local fire safe councils, things of that sort, those grants are available to cover a portion of those costs, but unfortunately, it's not enough to cover everything. I sit on the governor's task force for the tree mortality program, and that is constantly going forth with all the surrounding agencies, including federal agencies, to find funding to accomplish this. Now, when we deal with public land trees, those trees in national forests, those trees in BLM land, those trees on county right-of-ways, on municipalities, those programs have been in effect and they're ongoing now. As a matter of fact, in Calaveras County, we just recently contracted with TSS to provide the management of that program. That program will involve hiring contractors to actually remove trees in the county right-of-way that present a hazard to the county roadway systems. As far as the wood goes, there are some arrangements in place where if the owner of a private property tree is felled under contract, there is an option that they can keep that wood if they will. They can keep it for firewood, and they can sell the wood to a non-structural mill, as CAO Lutz indicated. There are such mills. I know we have one in Arnold, and they're actually milling that wood for furniture and non-structural items. Ironically, one of the byproducts, or if it is a byproduct, of the bark beetle infestation on our trees is it resulted in what they call blue stain. And when it first came out, blue stain was a wood that was non-compatible with structural, and it wasn't worth very much. Ironically, during the last year, that's become a very high choice of wood for decorative decking and walls and things of that sort of non-structural. So something that wasn't worth anything now becomes a premium. So there is a market for that. Constantly, like I said, on a state level, we are actively looking for different ways to fund the private property owners, and they're facing very severe costs, folks. I know in Blue Lake Springs, where I live, we've had quotes of anywhere from $30,000 to $45,000 to remove trees off of private property. And folks just don't have that kind of money sitting in the bank. We are aggressively going after this. Mr. Moss, I called you back. I didn't want to take over your show here, but we had to get those issues addressed to Ms. Newman.
Thank you.
Can
And
you
I
add
also-
anything?
I also wanted to add the SRA funds through CAL FIRE, the State Responsibility Area funds that CAL FIRE has released. And in cases with the fire safe councils here in Calaveras County, they're actually looking for people to actually, they maybe are, what I think they said maybe a third through their grant, and they've got another year or so to go. But there are some funds available through the SRA funds as well. And that's very important for private property owners. It's not a lot of money, but I think part of their programs is they'll put X amount of dollars per tree towards taking down that tree. So they can contact their fire safe councils for that information. Were there any other questions from the board that you would like clarification on regarding tree mortality?
I may just make one reference. Ladies and gentlemen, when we talk about tree mortality and we talk about butte fire trees, those are two separate individual programs. And sometimes we get that confused. The butte fire is FEMA funded along with OES and county funds. At this time, there is no funding available other than CDAA funds, California Disaster Assistance Agency, funding for private owners to have trees removed that do not fall in the right-of-way of county or do not fall in the area of state highways, things of that sort. So that funding is available. You can go to the CAL FIRE website to find more information. You can go to the Calaveras County website under the tree mortality page and find that information. Or you can give Mr. Moss a call. He'll give you a hand.
Certainly. And we also have a dynamic new OES director, William Downs, as well. And that's not a deflection, by the way. But I also wanted to mention one final thing that's very important. The public will start receiving rights of entry requests here in the very near future to take down trees that are on private property that can affect the right-of-way. What I want to clarify here is that doesn't mean they'll come through and take down all the trees on your property. It's only those trees, and that again goes back to the SRA funds kind of options. They only take down trees that will affect the right-of-way, and then you will also see crews ramping up eventually to take down the trees in the right-of-way proper as well. So again, right-of-way trees, very important. Many people saw those during the Butte fire. This one's a little different. It doesn't have caveats on that the Butte fire did. It's a pretty straightforward document, and the public will be seeing those soon.
Thank you, Mr. Moss.
State responsibility area.
Supervisor Toffenelli.
Brian, do you know anything about whether a person can call PG&E if they have a tree that may be teetering on falling across power lines to their home or power lines anywhere? Do you have something that you can bring forward for that?
Absolutely. I would definitely emphasize that if private property owners see PG&E or a tree or trees potentially affecting their lines, certainly contact PG&E. They will be out there to take care of that. They have done a tremendous job in removing a large amount of trees over the last year and a half, primarily because of the infrastructure, and we don't want to see a repeat of Butte, much less North Bay. So with that said, yes, definitely. If anybody observes any kind of trees that look like they may come into contact with lines, please do contact PG&E.
I may add one quick caveat to that. Those are the lines owned by PG&E.
Correct.
The lines coming from a telephone pole to your outbuilding or your residence are not covered by that program. Right. Just those lines owned by PG&E, the main transmission lines. Thank you, Mr. Moss. Appreciate you coming back. Supervisor Mills.
Yeah, not so much, but Brian, you're aware that Central Fire received a grant from the Community Foundation that for those people in that area can contact Chief Stone.
Oh, perfect.
But the point is that I think the Community Foundation wants to be sure that they're capable of performing. They could have given them more, and they were aware of that. So it's up to Central Fire to be able to perform to what they're wanting to do first. And then there's possibly more money available to that district for their additional work. So it's just information only.
Well, that's really good news. I actually was not aware of that. So, you know, coupled again with funding through SRA funds to the fire safe councils, anything helps. Anything and everything helps. And again, that does not affect the right-of-way trees. It does not affect the ROEs for the trees that affect the right-of-way, and it doesn't affect the PG&E trees. That is the part where everybody's really looking for extra assistance. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm a regular attendee on the Foothill Fire Safe Council meetings in the county anyway, so up to date on what they're doing with CDAA and the grants.
Excellent. Excellent.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. That information will be coming to the Fire Council next week, Calvert County. Further questions of Mr. Moss? Thank you, Mr. Moss.
Yes, and one final comment is that we do have a tree mortality task force locally, as well as a state task force that Supervisor Oliveira sits on, and that meets once a month, and that is all the stakeholders, including the fire safe councils, and that's how we know this information. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there further public comment on this particular agendized item? Sir, would you step to the microphone for us?
I am Floyd Winters of Mountain Ranch, and the one lady that spoke here referred to people that were burnt out by the Butte fire and have tremendous property and landlocked. I am one of the people that the wife and I, wife being 87 years old, we was devastated by losing everything we owned. Now we do not have the money. I tried to come back and rebuild. We've been established here since 1980, and it has gotten to the point that even our taxes are killing us. And does this mean I wind up losing my land because I can't afford to clear it and keep going to rebuild? Where does a person go from here?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Lutz? Were you up? I'm sorry for interrupting. I know it's important comment. Did you hear the comments made by this gentleman as far as taxes, the Butte fire, and what's happening? I know we have a situation in our assessor's office that we're still dealing with Butte fire claims. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe, and I wouldn't want to speak for the assessor.
I
At
understand.
this point, I would be more comfortable having her address if there are any remaining ones, but we certainly have, the assessor's office has been working to get both the properties that were in a declined state caught up, which was the bulk of this last fiscal year, and I believe then they are still working on some of that homes in the Butte fire burn area, but again, I would be more comfortable deferring that question to the assessor to answer.
Okay. Sir, do you...
If I may comment on that, I have put in an appeal on my taxes with the tax board, and they have basically told me that they cannot give me any more assistance. They took just 10% down on my property taxes for land, which is totally burnt off. And I was told by Leslie Davis, the tax assessor lady, I was told by her that they lowered my taxes by 10% for the damage done to my land. A 10% reduction in my taxes won't even start to clean it up. She said they sent assessors out to look at my property. They couldn't have gone out there because the trees are down and across the roads. You can't even get down to part of my property. I have two sections, a 60 acre, a 20 acre. And something's not coming out right. She says she can't help me anymore. I have an appeal coming up on the 18th, I believe, and it feels like I'm falling on deaf ears.
Chair.
So thank you, and thank you for your time, and I hope other people aren't having it as bad.
Chair.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, I would just like to state that that is part of the assessment appeals process, which is managed by the clerk of the board's office. We have been in contact with Mr. Winters and are working to schedule him to an assessment appeals hearing. This resolution is to adopt the tree mortality resolution, and that's
I
it.
understand we're kind of dovetailing item number 8 into this, and that was my next question. Is this an active appeals board case right now? And obviously it is. That covered?
That was my point is I thought I'm a little in danger of us walking into an area that's not on the agenda, and that if we really want to go there, then let's put it on the agenda so we all can talk about it.
I was fully aware of that, but seeing item number 8 kind of dovetails into this, and seeing they're both informational items, it's not going to require a vote. Is there any further public comment on item number 6 and number 8? Mr. Wilson.
Gentlemen, I have a question. On item 6 and item 8, both of those are concerning private property. I assume we require a permit for those people to cut down those trees or a contractor to cut down those trees. I question, are those contractors and their employees background checks since they're on private property and could rob those people at gunpoint or some
Mr.
other
Wilson.
way?
Mr. Wilson.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any further public comment on these two items?
I belong to Murphy CERT, and I go to the Fire Safe Council meetings regularly. And if you go to the Fire Safe Council's website, you can go to their website and get an application for funding help through their website. It's not a lot, as Brian said, but it is better than nothing. They will also help you with people to get you contracts for tree removal. There is products out there and programs out there for people like this, that, like Bonnie was saying. It's just we need to be helpful of helping them get that answer, okay? If you know of a neighbor that doesn't have that has tree problems, ask for help. Ask them to use your website for them. Some seniors don't have, computer access. And so if you step up and you are a neighbor, step up and help them. There is funding, as Mr. Oliveira has said.
Thank you, ma'am. Ladies and gentlemen, any further public comment? We're going to be taking a 15-minute break. Let staff catch your breath.
We need a motion on number 6, and then we have number 8.
Chair,
still.
I'd like to move the two items, 6 and 8.
Excuse me, are these action items?
I'll second it.
Yeah, they
All
are.
right. Motion made by Supervisor Mills, seconded by Supervisor Clapp. We're going to be voting on item number 6. We'll vote these individually. Any public comment on the motion? Seeing none. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed indicate by saying no. Hearing none, motion carries 5-0 unanimous. Item 8, I'm sorry.
Item number 8 is from the Administrative Office. Adopt a resolution continuing a local state of emergency for the removal of hazardous trees caused by the Butte Fire with the imminent threat of severe winter weather.
Any presenters? Okay, any comments by the board, by staff? Any public comment? I'd entertain a motion.
I move this item, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Moved by Supervisor Toffenelli, second by Supervisor Garamendi. No further public comment. Call for a vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed indicate by saying no. Hearing none, motion carries 5-0 unanimous. Now we'll take a 15-minute break. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're back in session. Madam Clerk.
Regular agenda. Item number 10, planning. Conduct a public hearing to adopt an ordinance rescinding Chapter 17.95 and replacing it with a new Chapter 17.95, banning or regulating cannabis cultivation and related commercial activities. Certify environmental impact report and adopt findings of fact or find that adoption of the ordinance is exempt from CEQA pursuant to Section 26055H of the Business and Professions Code.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, before we get started, I have a couple of things I'd like to say. This has been a very long process for Calaveras County. Personally, I've gone through two actual board of supervisors when dealing with this issue. It has split our community in several different factions. It has caused people to do and say things that normally wouldn't have been done. But one of my very major concerns is what it's done to our staff. What it's done to our legal department, our planning department, our code compliance, our auditor's department. And it's come to the time and place where we need to get back on this even keel. To do that, I have to publicly apologize for the actions of some citizens in this county. I'm going to publicly apologize for some actions and things done by staff. And I'm going to publicly apologize for some of the members of this Board of Supervisors. Now, we all know what our plan is. We all know what our jobs are. But we have disrespected our employees. We've caused them great grief when they're just trying to do the best job they can for this county. And that means County Council Stedfield, County Council Moss, Planning Director Mr. Maurer, and their staff. I am convinced they did nothing but give you the best job they possibly can when dealing with a very difficult issue. And I'm quite upset to the fact that they were put through this. And I feel it's my responsibility, not only as board chair, but as a supervisor for this county, to apologize to them. And I do that for everybody in our county and on our board and in our staff positions. Now, having said that, we're going to go into this situation, and I want everybody to understand how we're going to address this. We're going to look at 3, maybe 4 different alternatives brought up by staff. At that time, board and staff will have an opportunity to discuss items of their interest on this. And once we've gone through all the alternatives, I'm going to open it up to public comment. So be prepared to discuss the information presented on all the alternatives when it comes to your turn at the mic during public comment. After public comment, we'll come back to the board and we'll call for a vote on those alternatives. If there is proper motion, second, and make sure we act by the rules. Now, I'm going to do something out of character here. I want you to understand that staff includes not only the folks sitting at this diocese or the folks sitting at that table, it's the folks sitting in those back rows. Sheriff's Department, Fire Department, Planning, Code Compliance, Environmental, they are all staff. They are not limited to any time limit, folks, because they are staff. You will have 3 minutes. Is there any question about our procedure? Let me know now. I'm going to give the opportunity to raise your hand and come to the mic and ask that question about our procedures. Sir, would you come up here, please, to the mic?
This meeting today,
It's a question, Mr. Wilson.
my question is why is public comment limited to 3 minutes when there are 4 or more possible choices to discuss? Why does the public only get 3 minutes to voice their opinion when we're the ones that have to live with the decision this board is making today?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wilson. I'll answer your question. It's board chair discretion, and that's 3 minutes. Thank you, sir. Any further questions? Seeing none, we'll begin. By the way, folks, we'll be breaking for lunch between 12 and 12:30 for an hour and a half, so you can plan your day. Mr. Maurer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Peter Maurer, Planning Director. With me is Julie Montz-Lewis from County Council, Tiffany Wright from our outside council, Remy Moose-Manley, and Chris Muntek from Ascent Environmental, the firm that prepared the EIR. What you have before you are 3 different, fully prepared and ready to be adopted alternatives to a cannabis ordinance. In October, we brought before you a Planning Commission recommendation that was a fully vetted, fully prepared ban alternative, along with an equally weighted but not fully prepared regulatory alternative. At that time, there was additional information that was brought before the board. The board continued the hearing for a week, and then on the 24th, a motion was made to incorporate recommendations made by Supervisor Toffanelli and refer it back to the Planning Commission for consideration to include the provisions that they had previously identified along with Supervisor Toffanelli's version. The Planning Commission reviewed that, where staff prepared a draft ordinance, fully written draft ordinance that included, to the best of our ability, those provisions, both the board recommendation as well as the original provisions of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission looked at that and came up with something different. So what we have then is Alternative 1, which is a refinement of what we had prepared and sent to the board on November 29th. We've had further conversations with our environmental consultant to make sure that all of the mitigation measures were incorporated into the ordinance. We worked with the Sheriff's Office to address concerns that he had. We worked with the Environmental Management Agency Director to ensure that the conditions were things that were implementable and addressed the concerns. And so that ordinance, in the best of our ability, or that alternative reflects what we felt was the combination of the requirements, the recommendations that Supervisor Toffanelli had identified on the 24th of October, along with the Planning Commission's previous sort of bullet-pointed list. Alternative 2 before you is the Planning Commission's recommendation, or one of the Planning Commission's recommendations, and that is a regulatory ordinance that is modeled after Alternative 1, but with some distinct differences. And let me just identify quickly what those differences are. One was that the cap of 50 outdoor cultivation registrations was eliminated, that the minimum parcel size, that 50 acres in Alternative 1 is reduced to 20 acres, and could be as low as 5 acres if the property is surrounded by acceptable zoning, the 3 zones of general agriculture, agricultural preserve, or general forest. If the parcel is surrounded by those zones in which the ordinance would allow cultivation to occur, then that minimum parcel size could be as low as 5 acres. The permitted activity could include a self-distribution license, which allows a cultivator to move his own product to the retail outlet. The Planning Commission felt that requiring cannabis to be grown in containers was not something that they supported, so that provision was eliminated. They also felt that an individual could have more than one registration, so multiple parcels. Also that the registrations would not be limited to a single parcel under a Williamson Act contract. So if there's a contract that has multiple parcels, each lot that met the criteria could have a cultivation area on it. The setbacks were reduced. The 500-foot setback that's in Alternative 1 was reduced to 200 feet. although it is 500 500 feet from any adjacent residential parcel, and that there would not necessarily be a requirement that a residence be on the property in which cultivation registration is requested. They did require that there be a structure, a permanent permitted structure for any kind of activity, so that to avoid some of the greenhouses or the hoop houses and more temporary structures that have caused some problems out there. Finally, they did allow for a provision that a cultivator that was previously approved could retain 10% of the overall canopy as nursery stock so that they could continue with their stock in the event of getting a new license. Those are the major differences. There are some other nuances within there, but I think those are the primary ones. The third alternative is the ban that was previously presented to you back in October. So those are the three alternatives that we have. We have developed findings of fact that are the statement of how the EIR addresses each of these alternatives, how the mitigation measures were incorporated into them, where we have identified measures or impacts that could not be fully mitigated, and findings of overriding consideration included within those. So there are three separate sets of findings of fact, each to support whatever alternative you decide to go with, if you decide to go with any of the three that we've prepared for you so far. You have a broad range of choices here. You could go with any one of those as written today. You may modify any of those. Any modification, we will have to look at it, and if it requires changes of the finding of fact, then we'll need to spend additional time to support whatever that is you do. But I want you to make sure that you know that you are not limited to just what we have prepared, but we prepared those in the event that you find that any one of those are acceptable, they can be adopted today. We would recommend that if you make modifications, that you give us some time to make sure that our findings support what you've prepared or what you desire to do. There is also a provision under SB 94, Mount Cursa, the state legislation that reconciled Prop 64 with other state laws, that allows a county or a city to adopt an ordinance without going through CEQA. It's exempt from CEQA. If the ordinance requires that all subsequent action is discretionary, meaning that all has to go through another CEQA review process and some type of discretionary review that looks at each individual cultivation site or any other activity associated with cannabis. We have drafts of ordinances that would fall under that criteria prepared, but we have not fully vetted it yet and did not release that as part of the packet or for public review. But if you feel that you would prefer to adopt an ordinance that does not require us to certify the EIR, that we use that exemption, then that is an action that you also are free to take, but we would recommend that you give us direction to bring that back to you, and we would recommend that a special hearing be set immediately after the new year so that we bring that forward to you. I'm going to step aside for just a minute for an announcement that I forgot to make at the very beginning, and that is apparently some members of the public received a notice for a hearing today for a cannabis appeal. Normally, the third Tuesday of the month is reserved for planning, particularly cannabis appeal items. We had mailed out notice to some with the anticipation that would be heard today, and then this meeting was set for this hearing instead, and so we bumped all those to a January hearing. And I apologize to any of the members of the public that came specifically for that hearing. You will receive new notice for a new hearing date for the third meeting in January.
Could I interrupt you, Mr. Mauer? Is there anybody present that's here for that appeal hearing? Thank you.
Okay, so I guess
Go
that
ahead.
wasn't really an issue after all.
We're
I just
okay.
wanted to make sure that everyone was here. It was brought to my attention during the break. The range of options to you is very broad. We hope that we provide enough of prepared alternatives that if you decide that one of those is acceptable to the majority of the board, that we can move forward and adopt an ordinance today. But we are also prepared to make any adjustments that you feel are appropriate. There are several other members of staff that would like to make a presentation, I believe. But if you have any questions of me, happy to answer them, or any member of the team that helped develop the ordinance in the EIR.
Does the board have any questions of Mr. Mauer or his staff at the table? Seeing none, we'll hear from staff. Who would like to go first? Don't all jump up at once, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, maybe while other people are coming up, I did pass out, and there were a number of copies available for the public before the meeting started, a errata sheet. There are, as we were looking through things at last minute, we received comments from at least one planning commissioner, other staff members, our consultant team, that inadvertent errors were made, things were overlooked, last minute changes to make sure that the measures from the EIR were incorporated. So you each have a copy of an errata sheet, and they address the two regulatory versions. There were no changes that were necessary to the ban alternative.
Good morning, Sheriff. How are you?
Good morning. I'm good. Good morning, board members and staff. I just have a few things. I did the Dennis Mills. I put my little wings on so I know where I'm going here. What I'm going to do is I will go through this per each individual ordinance, one be the ban, and then one being the one that the Planning Commission put together, and then the one that the board did. I want to start with the ban, seeing as how it's actually the easiest one for me. It has the least amount of things that I'd like to see. And I'm going to go, I got my page number. I don't know if you guys' page numbers. Go to page 7 of the ban, see if we're on the same page. Seems like every time I print something up, it's different from what you folks have. It starts in the middle of the page. It has the big letter C. Are we on the same page? It says packet page 140. It says packet page 140 or page number 7. Top right corner says 10C, Charles.
And which item, Sheriff, are you referencing to on
It's
that page?
under for the public, it's under 17.95.40, subsection C, Charles. Number 3. It talks about if a person cultivating cannabis does not own the parcel on which the private residence is located, express written permission from the owners consenting to cannabis cultivation and any associated material alterations to the property must be obtained prior to commencing cultivation, shall be maintained at the private residence, and shall be provided to the county upon request of any enforcement officer. I would like to see if we're going to go with a ban, that anybody that is going to be growing marijuana for personal use get a permit through the county. And the reason I'm asking for that, a couple of reasons. One, I believe that it is in the best interest of the property owners, if it is a rental, that they have something that is notarized, that the grower have something that is notarized, showing that the people that are renting do have a legal right, not just a piece of paper says I say that Billy Bob can grow marijuana. It needs to be notarized. We're running into a lot of residences that are having commercial grows within the private residences, and the property owners know nothing about it. It also lets code compliance know if they get complaints. It lets environmental health know if they're getting complaints, and lets the sheriff's department know if they're getting complaints of a lot of criminal type activity going in and out of these residences. So that would be a request that I make.
Sheriff?
Yes.
Would that include a Prop 64, personal six-plant grow?
That's part of Prop 64, yes.
I understand.
And I know that we can't stop them from growing, and part of Prop 64, it looks like from what I'm reading in the ordinance that they have to grow inside. It also states in there that they can only grow in a single room. They can't grow in multiple rooms. So again, if we get complaints or co-compliance or health department or somebody's getting complaints that there's a lot of activity to us, obviously as cops, that tends to lead that there's probably some criminal activity going on. So we're going to have to do some research, and we'd like to be able to know whether this particular residence has growing going on through the county. If it doesn't, if we pull that up and it doesn't, then it makes it real easy for us to obtain a search warrant to go and eradicate these residences that are growing illegally.
Okay, thank you.
That's the only thing I have on the ban ordinance. The ordinance that the board somewhat put together. I have a few items. Again, it goes to section 1795.60, page number 14, or packet page number 48.
What was the code again?
Pardon me?
What was the code again?
1795.60, registration and permitting requirements for all cannabis cultivation. We all there? Under A, subsection 2, again, it states that there's a letter that shall be named, or excuse me, if the applicant is not the owner of the parcel, be permitted a letter on form developed by the planning department and signed and dated and notarized by the owners of the parcel, authorizing the applicant to cultivate medical cannabis on the parcel and to make any associated material alterations to the property. Again, I'd like to see that paperwork submitted with their permit so that the Planning Commission has that on file so that we know that these folks are in fact getting permission from the property owners. Two pages after that, on page 16, packet page number 50, subsection C, Charles, and this is more of a question for Ms. Stedfield. I don't remember, and I couldn't find the language that the FBI gave me to put in there. I, for some reason, thought that it said Interstate Identification Index, which is the III that I was talking about, to get the be able to do the background checks on commercial growers throughout the United States. And again, that's a question for you. I don't remember what language you have in here, and Ms. Moss, for you too, obviously, if that is incorporated in there so that we can get the FBI backgrounds.
It's my understanding that the language that you provided to my office was the language that was used in each of the drafts.
Okay.
But I would defer to Ms. Moss-Lewis to confirm that.
I received a letter with the language from Ms. Stedfeld and cut and pasted.
Okay. All right. If it was cut and pasted, then that's fine. I couldn't remember if it had that because it goes to the III. Subsection 2 says the sheriff shall develop standards to consider the results of the background checks utilizing the factors described in BNP 26057. I would like to see that changed to say utilized parts described in BNP 26057. 26057 is very specific to certain crimes that are in the penal code, and I think we've talked about this before, under violent felonies and certain felonies, certain convictions. That kind of ties my hands a little bit. I'd like to see that changed to parts described. And then continuing with that, it says, and other relevant factors, and shall summarize his findings with respect to each one in a written report to the planning department. I thought that we had resolved that I didn't need to respond to the planning department unless there was an appeal. And then the appeal would be going to county council. The following page, subsection 4, it says, only an applicant or landlord may appeal a decision made by the sheriff pursuant to this section. If the sheriff's decision is appealed, the reviewing body shall review the sheriff's decision for abuse of discretion. I have a little problem with that verbiage. I try not to abuse anything other than my dog when he takes and kills one of my chickens. But it says, I would like to see it say, if the sheriff's decision is appealed, the reviewing body shall review the sheriff's decision. Period.
Subject to existing regulations and law, correct?
And that's fine, yes.
Okay.
Page 21, and you don't even have to look at this. This is, again, it talks about the letter being on file and available upon request. I just want to make sure that a letter from the property owner is being submitted. That's under 1795.70, operating restrictions. It's because this is the same thing throughout the ordinance, just to make sure that those all get changed. Is it easier if I give you the subsection or just the page number?
Packet number would help.
Packet number is page 6060.
What's the page number?
Page number is 2626, subsection 7. Well, there.
Okay.
It says, if the maximum canopy area of cannabis cultivated exceeds the maximum total canopy area authorized for the parcel under this chapter, the total canopy size shall be reduced to conform to the requirements of this chapter within 24 hours. I just would like to see, it says here below that, says all excess cannabis shall be immediately destroyed. I would just like to show or see if there's a way that we can show that there is evidence that it has been destroyed, so they're not just removing and taking to another site.
What would serve as evidence, Sheriff?
That's a good question. I would think that if they're going to destroy, that code compliance or the sheriff's office can be there to see that they destroy the plants.
Sorry, Sheriff, you're not going to get everything you need, but I'm going to tell you
I know
right up
that.
front. So, in all fairness, if they have a cultivator that's in violation of this, and they say, okay, I want to comply, I'm going to call the sheriff's department, how soon can you get a deputy there?
We will make it a point to get out there ASAP. I mean.
Define ASAP. 24
within
hours?
24 hours.
Okay.
We can do that.
All right. Is that
Absolutely.
required to be in this, your recommendation?
Well, again, like you said, I'm not going to get everything I want. This is just something that there's a lot of marijuana being grown. They're growing, some of them are going to be growing outside their canopy size, and it's just going to eliminate the possibility of them taking and moving the plants like they're doing now. And again, it's not the registered growers so much that we're seeing it with. It's when people are, when code compliance is going out and saying eradicate your plants and they give them their 18 days, we go out there, the plants are gone, but it's just because they've moved them to another site. I don't know if this is realistic or not. It's just something I'm bringing to your attention.
Well, when it says destroyed, they're going to have to provide some type of evidence, and that could be eyewitness by a deputy, if you will, or some type of method of proving to the sheriff's department that it was actually
Well, it's not
abated.
just us, it's co-compliance and,
Okay.
and the planning department too, that needs to know that they've destroyed the plants, because that's what the ordinance says, that they have to destroy them. It doesn't say they get to take them to site B. It says they need to be destroyed.
Okay.
So they have to show some type of evidence. Most cameras, if they take pictures, are, again, it's a guess. Yes, Mr. Tom.
Sheriff, I want to make this work for you. And on the 24 hours, that's a hard time. You guys have a lot of other stuff going on in the county on any given moment and not enough deputies to start with. Do you think that maybe as far as evidence, we might use a system similar to, when you get a deer tag, it could be verified by your local fire department or, a volunteer reserve officer or something?
Yeah, we have other options available. I'm sure, my volunteer units would be probably available. I don't know if the fire department, that'd be a question for them if they're available. Again, there's code compliance. Somebody within the county needs to know that these plants were destroyed, because that's what it says in the ordinance. That's all.
I hear, I agree with you. I'm just trying to figure out
Yeah.
a way to do it that you're not pulling deputies off a violent crime to go see if
Well,
someone pulled their plant.
And I understand, but I'm not going to pull somebody off of violent crimes to go check plants.
Right.
That's what my marijuana enforcement team is for.
Right.
That's their job, is to make sure that this stuff is being done.
Okay.
So if they're working something, I have 4 of them, I can send one of them over. So there's an option. Like I said, if we have that 24-hour
Okay.
ability,
Yeah, that's acceptable.
we go send that Captain Macedo. On the following page, subsection 11, letter A, Adam, ensure that any individual who will be participating in any on-site cultivation activities first submit to a background checks required. And this is a request. I don't know how in the weeds this is getting, but I'd like to see cannabis consultants involved in that. If they're having any fingers in consulting with cannabis, I think they should be able to be background.
Sheriff, would you extend that to any person on the cultivation site?
No.
That's employed?
No,
Or
because
contracted?
if you have a contractor's coming in to do electrical work or plumbing work or something like that, they're not involved in the cannabis process. I'm more looking at people that are involved in the cannabis process. And my assumption is that they're involved in consulting. I don't know how in-depth that consultant is going to get. So again, it's just a request. It doesn't make or break it, but it's a request.
Would you be comfortable with any consultant regarding cannabis cultivation?
Well, that's what I was looking at, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, all right.
So just inserting, just under the individuals, including consultants.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
And then on page 37, packet page 7-1. Subsection kind of 4 and 5 is just a question, and a lot of this is going to fall back to Mr. Mauer and the planning department. I understand that I have the ability to deny somebody if they have a conviction. My question would be, how are we going to deal with somebody who is an active grower, they have their permit, and they commit a criminal offense that would deem them not able to continue with their registration process or with their permitting or having the license? They've committed that offense. Do I just send a recommendation to Mr. Mauer and have him make notice to them, or can we stop them from growing at that point, or what are we going to do with that? I mean, here's my for instance, since this is on the outside, obviously. We have somebody who's a registered grower, they've got their grow going well, and they go down to make a delivery and they shoot and kill somebody. Now they're in the middle of a homicide investigation. Now what do we do?
Sheriff, you're in a real gray area on that one.
How's that gray? He's
Conviction
committed.
versus
That's
arrest.
my point, and that's
Yeah.
that's why I'm asking that.
Yeah.
I have somebody who's committed a criminal offense, but we're going to allow them to continue to grow because they haven't been convicted through us, and that's what I'm asking. And maybe it's a question for county council. Can I just make that recommendation to the planning department that, hey, this person has committed this grievous offense, and can they suspend his permit? Although it's hard, they got plants this tall, it's hard, okay, stop, you can't grow anymore. They're not, the plants are gonna continue to grow.
What if the crime's petty theft?
Again, that's not something that's gonna be.
It's not murder?
No.
Okay, I understand.
So
County
just,
counsel?
again, something to throw on your radar.
Okay.
That's all.
If I could just follow up on that one point, or the item 4 there, this is a question that I circled when I was going through this. What does the owner of the permittee mean? Is that a term?
Owner is a term of art under Mount Cursive, which we've imported into our definitions, and it's somebody with a 20% or more ownership of an entity.
But is it
Or an
an owner of the
individual.
permittee? Is that how
Yeah.
we?
That actually is
That's actually a
the
term.
technical.
Okay.
way
That
to
was
say
that
it.
20% that the state
Yeah.
put in, right?
But I thought it was a typo. Okay.
Okay.
Do permittee.
That's it for that ordinance. The Planning Commission's ordinance, I have just a few. Again, it also has that letter that needs to be on file. I say it needs to be notarized and be submitted with the applicant. Well, that's just a generic. It's throughout it all. And Ms. Moss and I talked about this on page 32, packet page 115. Make sure everybody's there. See, Gary's still doing this, so I figure he's still looking. Okay.
I'm there.
Subsection 10, we talked about this. It says, any armed security personnel. I request, and Ms. Moss said that this is doable, that nobody has armed security. I have talked to Sonoma County's sheriff, and they've had gun battles between their armed security and people that are coming in. I do not believe, as a peace officer, that anybody's stuff, money, or marijuana is worth one human life. And if we have armed security on site, the potential for someone to want to shoot to protect their stuff is higher. We don't even have armed security in banks anymore. So I just have a problem with that. I see that causing issues down the road. Again, it's a request. I think that it's a potential problem, considering what I've heard from other sheriffs. And I specifically named Sonoma County because I've already talked to that sheriff, and they have an ordinance that their sheriff's department has absolutely nothing to do. They said it was a land use issue and they were not being involved. So if they have an illegal grow and the neighbors call and say, hey, we have an illegal grow, they say call code compliance. Sheriff's department does not get involved because it's a land use issue. We're in a little bit different ball game up here right now. So I would like to see that that no armed security personnel are available. Yes, sir.
Sheriff, specifically, you're speaking to firearms.
I'm speaking to firearms, yes.
Sheriff, is there any other business in this county that you're aware of that incorporates armed security?
No.
Have you ever had that request, to your knowledge?
No.
Okay.
Not
Thank you.
armed. I heard somebody say, yes, there has. Please fill me in. Huh?
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Sheriff?
Good guess. All right.
Thank you. Thank you
anyhow,
very much.
The last thing I have is in regards to our fire departments. I think that they have been looked over. We are indulging right now into indoor grows. I've shown a lot of pictures to some of our fire personnel about the illegal electrical inside of these grows, indoor grows. And I know that there are 3 chiefs here, I believe, that are willing to get up here and speak about what they would like to see. They're involved in this process. There's some safety concerns that they have, not only for themselves, but for any first responder that has to go into one of these homes. So I will let them come up and talk, unless you have questions for me.
Questions of the sheriff? By board?
I have a question. Sheriff, in the Planning Commission, you spoke briefly about issues of security on these,
Speak the microphone.
sorry,
Thank you.
issues of security on some of these sites, and you suggested, you had some opinions on co-location for concentration of grows. Do you want to elaborate any more on that, or?
Well, I did. I mentioned that it was asked of whether I thought it was easier to control if we had multiple grows on one site, and yes, it is. Again, that's going to fall back into your folks' realm on what you want to do with it, but for us, and I know that one of the other board members brought up that they were afraid that there was going to be thefts between the growers that were on that site. I respectfully disagree, because these people are going to have to put in camera systems. If you go to the video portion of this, which they've adopted from the state regulations, and I can tell you the number, I see you're writing it down. It is under State Code 5044. It actually lays out how the security has to work, how many days it has to retain information, it has to have video surveillance on each individual ingress and egress of the grow, whether indoor or outdoor. So it's very specific, and I thank Ms. Moss and them for putting that into this. So again, we have somebody who has 100 acres. They're out in the middle of nowhere, and they want to put 10 grows on there. Those growers are going to have to work together to put this video surveillance in. They can individually do their own systems, but it allows planning, code compliance, and us to go to one site to visit multiple grows. It just, it was asked, and it would be easier for us.
Thank you. If I might ask another question.
Sure.
Since we're working through this, we have 3 different versions that are in front of us, and they're all different, but I'm trying to figure out how to make the community safer. Under distribution, I've been trying to figure out distribution and transportation issues. I'm concerned that if we do move forward with regulation, that people would be, if we don't have local transport, you don't know who's coming in from out of county to transport for us. So
Correct.
If somebody's rolling down the road with a cargo van full of product, you're not aware, whereas if we had transportation distribution in here, they would have to register with you, I'm assuming, so that the SO's office knows where the vehicle is, when it's transporting, and, if it's pulled over on the side of the road, there might be an issue.
Correct. There is a section, let me see if I can find it here real quick, that the state has put together, and it's very, again, specific on transportation. It's under 5312, and it basically states that they have to supply vehicle information, proof of registration, amongst an array of other things. So you're correct. If for some reason there was transportation in the county to remove that property, to take it out of the county, we're going to have an idea who's coming in and out of our county, whereas if they rely on specific distributors from outside the area, we're not going to know who they are.
So I'm assuming that if we moved in any of the 2 courses towards regulation, you would want to see that inserted?
It would be beneficial, absolutely.
Make us
for
safer?
the county as a whole. Yeah, so we know who's coming in and out. It's just like having the employees be in background. We know who's in our county.
Further questions of the sheriff?
Thank you.
You'll be available later.
I will.
Will you be monitoring and come over, or?
I will.
Okay.
If you-
Sheriff, thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you.
If we need you, we'll call you.
Just look at the camera and smile pretty and say, we need you back.
Thanks, Sheriff.
Chief Johnson, welcome.
Good morning, Board of Supervisors. I had some couple pieces of information I'd like to make sure that you have.
If you'll hand it to the clerk for us.
All right, once again, good morning. Mike Johnson, Ebbets Pass Fire District. Today I'm speaking on behalf for the Fire Chiefs Association for the Calaveras Special Districts that comprise your local municipalities for Calaveras County.
Chief, please
Yes, sir.
accept our condolences on the loss of the Cal Fire firefighters. I know you guys are just like law enforcement and like everybody in the community. We all suffer that loss.
Thank you, Supervisor Oliveira. Yes, Corey Iverson unfortunately suffered the ultimate sacrifice in the Thomas Fire. And 8-year veteran of CAL FIRE and engineer, and had a smoke inhalation, and many details I'm sure yet to come, but thank you very much.
Could I interrupt for just a moment?
Yes.
Did you bring copies for the public?
I have more copies. I don't think we have enough copies for all of them.
So I should go make copies.
Here, I've got some extras here if you want to just take one of these, if that makes sense. Okay, thank you. All right, so board, our association had created the a list of things that we felt were potential impacts to the fire service, and they've been disseminated out to you, and it was brought to the attention of the Planning Commission a while back as to essentially taking our best shot of other areas and what they have had impacts into the fire service. We looked at areas such as Colorado and some various other places that had some statistical or the best data we can, and obviously being relatively new for the fire service as well. There's not a whole history to go back on, but we did the best we could to present you with some numbers as to what we're going to forecast our impacts and the various sources that we use to present that to you. So today we're just asking the board to include, our local fire agencies and our public safety of at least a placeholder for some impact mitigations for if we're to go forward with the commercial cultivation. And some of the examples that we bring to you today of what that could look like is on the third page, which is probably highlighted on the second piece of paper that's stapled on there, was something that Monterey County had put into a provision that was at the bottom. The verbiage in there specifically speaks to what they feel is necessary. I believe something as a similar placeholder for Calaveras County is definitely required, and as we move forward into this industry and things become more developed, fire service is going to become more and more laser focused on what exactly those types of things are. Now, the sheriff was just talking about code enforcement. You'll see that there's a piece of code enforcement on the document that you have there. It also talks about, fire prevention bureaus and things that are very lofty and very high level because they typically cross over into other areas such as, post-certified fire prevention bureau type folks, things that I believe that, the sheriff's office, code enforcement are probably handling. It's just one of those things that sometimes with fire bureaus get involved with code enforcement along with some of the other regulations may or may not include our service. So in other words, if we're charged with going into, do our typical business inspection or things like that, if there's a nexus to those type of things and working within the confines of Prevention Bureau, could be handled in multiple different ways. But as long as you have a idea that these are some of the things that the fire service may be impacted on, we're satisfied that that these are things that we're concerned with.
Chief, I have a
Yes.
quick question. Our present situation is now, when we come across a fire, structure fire or outdoor fire involving cannabis cultivation,
Correct.
I know that there's a fire investigation that takes place to determine start, origin, means, things of that sort. When you now come across a scene like that, is the sheriff's department actually advised, or is that investigation actually contained in the fire department itself?
Oh, it's a very collaborative, depending on, if it becomes a crime scene, obviously, our local law enforcement is involved at that point. And as mentioned earlier today, but some of our areas and jurisdictions fall within state response areas, SRAs. Others are local response areas. And therefore, when talking about the state responsibility, especially regarding wildland fires, that triggers a whole different mechanism that could go all the way up to the state fire marshal's office and therefore come into our backyard as well.
Okay.
Your local fire chiefs have certain authorities, and then, like I said, it crosses over and bleeds over into all those other mechanisms. So hopefully,
But there is an enforcement investigation system in place, and it may involve state agencies versus local, or a combination of both, correct?
I would say you're absolutely correct. There is a mechanism, but I'm presenting to you that, if, let's say, we're impacted by an increase in this type of work, or a speciality, if you will, that we currently don't have in-house or in county, we may have to build that and bolster that capability within our organization somehow in some way. It doesn't necessarily have to wear a fire hat. Maybe it's a collaborative hat between multiple agencies.
Thank you, Chief.
Yes.
Go right ahead, I'm sorry, Supervisor Government.
Go ahead, you were on.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. I was going to piggyback on what you were talking about, because with Prop 64 and the indoor growing, my question would be to all the fire departments whether or not you have current confined space training, whether or not you have the equipment necessary to handle confined space extrication per NFPA, and that in some of these cases, even in the outdoor or the wildland situations, whether or not you're properly geared up to or suited up to respond to the hazmat side that could potentially exist, whether it be interior or exterior. But I'm leaning more towards the Prop 64 thought, that if we push these grows indoors, it's going to create an additional barrier or burden upon the fire districts to create the training and the equipment levels necessary to be safe in those environments.
You're absolutely correct, Supervisor Mills. So the point is that we have a very rural service model for fire service in Calaveras County. And there's no real need for an explanation why that is. It's because we're very rural. Now, if we transition into a more industrial type of fire service that's required, I'm here to ask your support that we build that capacity within that type of response model to transition from a rural community type of response model into an industrial type response model where necessary. To answer your questions, are we currently equipped across the board for confined space? A very select couple of pieces are, but it's not standard across the board. Are we ready for a full hazmat response without mutual aid outside of Calaveras County? And I think the answer is no. We'd have to build those capacities. So if we get ready and go down that path, we're going to need the tools to plan and create that response model for you from the fire side of things.
So as we run down that path, then the board needs to also consider what type of cost recovery, how are we going to, through a permit system or whatever it might be, develop that mechanism to be sure that this doesn't place an undue burden upon what the existing facility or services are capable of handling.
Sure, and as you're fully aware, fire service and public safety, we're very reactive, right? It happens and then we go to work. So we're trying to take this proactive approach, and I think across the fire service in general, the national, their NFPA, National Fire Prevention Association, they're just now coming out with a document on cannabis cultivation in 2018. So they're nearly coming out with a standard for the most part that's going to be talking about applications, permits, fire protection system, means of egress, growing and production of, marijuana, the extraction process if we ever get to that point, so on and so forth. So I mentioned that to you is things are very forthcoming. They're not super defined. All those points are very valid and real. I'm just want to make sure that everybody here understands it. With all of this, please endorse, or a placeholder in there. So as we come to you to build capacity to meet the response model that's required by Calaveras County, that those things are ready to go as far as that kind of support. So,
Thank you, Chief. Further, Supervisor Garamendi?
Chief,
yes, sir.
you've got a building capacity means money.
Yes, it does.
And under all three scenarios that we're looking today, there will be some sort of indoor growing, legal, illegal, personal, whatever. What type of resources do our fire departments need, i.e. how much?
Ooh, the how much is what plan is going forward, and
Spitball for us.
Ooh, I that would be. I don't know that I could do that on the spot. When we're talking personnel, that's usually our most expensive resource. We definitely need equipment, and if you're talking about how much responsibility or compliance or regulation would be going on to the fire service, the more you put in that category, the more resources are going to be needed. So, and it's something that, hey, a homework assignment, we'll be happy to give that to you, sir.
Yeah, and I'm sure that you guys coordinate with the sheriff's office on their hazmat teams, and training, I assume, would be part of this. And
Most definitely, and we're very excited about working with a new OEM manager as well.
thank you.
Chief, I have a couple questions.
Sure.
Supervisor Toffenelli?
At the bottom of the sheet, number 3, I guess, talks about a fire prevention plan being put on file. Does your district currently require fire prevention plans for each business?
So is this the sheet right here that you're referring to? Oh, under the cultivation approved?
Under the cultivation.
This is
So that's an example. This sheet is from what Monterey County had approved, apparently. And at the very bottom, there should be a highlighted section that I thought would be the very last paragraph in there is an example of what could be something that perhaps the Calaveras County could have approved in there as far as following suit with what other counties in California addressing something similar are putting some placeholder in there for the fire service is just the point of this.
So at this point, you don't have any requirements for fire prevention plans being filed?
Oh, for the cannabis?
I'm not just talking cannabis. I'm talking about any business or anything that you deal with within your district. Do you have a requirement for that, for any business or any building being constructed?
So between our area that we work in and the building department, I think is where the answer lies. And there's a lot of information that we work on collaboratively. Our focus in our district, I'll speak to that because I know that, is we primarily have, anything within our fire ordinance that applies, anything with pre-plans for fires that apply, annual business inspection for commercial, all those records, plus some that I'm not even mentioning, do exist within our office at the district.
Mm-hmm.
Others that are, pulling the initial permits and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we have a piece in that approval process, but more or less that lives with the county building department. So hopefully that answers your question.
Well, it does. I'm required where I'm at to have a fire prevention plan along with the wastewater runoff plan, and I'm annually inspected by the fire department, and the water board not annually, but I have to file annually my plan for both of them. So I was just wondering if that's the case here. And I know the districts are all different, but in your specific district, do you inspect annually for businesses?
We do. For businesses, yeah. And it is a very company officer level, meaning, you know, exit signs, fire extinguishers, and things along those lines. It's, there are
Fire
more significant.
extinguishers being charged properly.
Being inspected with-
In place.
that's right.
Right locations and
Right.
space, yeah.
Occupancy, loads, justifying certain types of mitigations for the,
Gases being stored properly.
yes, sir.
Chemicals being stored properly. and so
Right,
on.
right.
Okay.
Further questions of Chief Johnson?
Thank you.
Chief?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning. Joel Schwartz from the Copperopolis Fire Protection District.
Morning, Chief.
Good morning. I want to kind of formalize what Chief Johnson was talking about. I've reviewed all of these documents, and after reviewing them, it became apparent to me that there needed to be some additions, starting with the definitions. Nowhere in the definitions is the mention of first responders or fire districts in Calaveras County. Pardon me. While there is a definition for costs of enforcement that goes in pretty good detail discussing overhead, administrative costs, investigation, evidence storage, notices, correspondence, etc., we think there should be this kind of detail specifying the allocation of funds for the dangerous and expensive costs of mitigating the types of problems the Calaveras County Fire Services will be called out to address, such as electrical and chemical fires in legal indoor growing facilities as large as 10,000 square feet, entry into illegal growing and processing structures and sites that will certainly pose hazmat and confined space protocols which require special training and equipment. Motor vehicle accidents that include trucks transporting processed product or carrying hazardous materials for cultivation and processing. While the county sheriff, the housing department, the county agricultural commissioner, the enforcement officials, the planning department, the state water quality control board, and Central Valley Regional Water Control Board, the Environmental Management Agency, and many others enjoy identification and recognition in this document, nowhere is there found anything mentioning the fire department, the fire districts in Calaveras County, or first responders. I'm sure that all agencies mentioned in the ordinance will have budget to execute their assignments. All I'm recommending is that you specifically add and include the Calaveras County Fire Services and identify what is expected of us in terms of inspection and mitigation in this ordinance so that we can get our fair share and necessary share of the cannabis tax fund. Thank you very much for your time.
Chief, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
In Copperopolis, in your fire district, how many cannabis-related fires have you responded to in the last 3 years?
To my recollection, I believe there's been one, and that was in a private residence about 7 months ago. And it was every single room in the house was used for growing, except one corner was used for processing. There were electrical wires all over the place, chemicals all over the place, and it was a complete conflagration. The place was completely destroyed.
With the coming of Prop 64, recreational use, and the ability to cultivate 6 plants, do you expect that number to go up?
I think if they're going to be cultivating and processing, it's possible.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. I'll hear your point of order, ma'am, but you're going to have to come to the microphone for everybody here.
To answer your question on the fires, I live
Ma'am, the point of order is out of order. It's on procedural only. I'm sorry.
There's been 3 fires, Joel.
Perhaps before my time, I apologize for that.
Not a problem. I just wanted to understand if there's a possibility of increased response.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief.
I think, to your point then, the question has to be that even under Prop 64, where you are going into a potential structure and you don't know,
Correct.
that's quite one thing.
Yes.
So the need for a permit process under Prop 64 could be critical to the safety and the security of your responders.
Yes, we'd identify that that particular location is a processing plant or a growing facility. Sure.
So we need to
Absolutely.
include that in the discussion, that it's not so much about, the more we know, the better we're able to prepare.
Correct.
We aren't going to always catch the unknowns. They're going to be there no matter what.
Correct.
But where we have understood 64 indoor growing, as Chief Rohrbaugh had mentioned in Angels Camp, that they did see a uptick
Sure.
in house fires, especially in the San Jose area, as a result of indoor growing, and that we need to be able to include in what we discuss to try to mitigate that or minimize it to the best possible
Yeah.
through our discussion.
Yeah, and to my understanding, particularly with the indoor grows, the requirement for electricity and electrical outlets and wires hanging all over the place really increases the probability of a fire. So we would expect more incidents. That would be the expectation.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay.
Further questions?
Thank you.
Thank you once again. Any further from the fire department? Is there any other staff member that'd like to present?
Kevin Wright, Agricultural Commissioner.
Good morning, Mr. Wright.
Thank you. This is just for the record. Last Thursday, the Hardwood Advisory Committee met, and Mr. Mills was a member of the Hardwood Advisory Committee. And at that meeting, Adam Fries from CAL FIRE gave a presentation, and he mentioned that even on the registered grows, that there were many incidences of illegal grading or erosion, cutting of oak trees, and cutting of commercial timber. So, hearing that, the Hardwood Advisory Committee voted for a recommendation to a recommendation for the board to require a registered professional forester to evaluate any sites proposed for commercial cannabis production to determine if the site requires a conversion of timberland permit or requires any mitigation to oak woodland habitat prior to issuance of the cannabis registration. And he wanted that, or they decided that would be a good recommendation because Mr. Fries pointed out that when he went and issued his notice of violation to the registered growers, that they claimed that they did not know anything about any of those laws. So just for consideration, if that could be entered, if we go with the route of a legalization of the cannabis today or in the near future, that would be a consideration to investigate.
Questions?
Yeah.
Supervisor Garamendi.
Question, thank you very much, Kevin, for conveying that. Do you need a permit, a timber harvest plan to cut oak trees in this county?
Commercial, no, you don't need, a ag person does not need to have a permit to cut an oak tree.
So what would be
in most places.
So what would be the purpose of having registered forester do that inspection?
In some areas, the oak trees are considered commercial when they're grown with other commercial trees. And in this case, it wasn't just the oak trees that were being cut down, but it was commercial trees. And anytime you have a habitat where you are taking a environment out of one use and putting into another, so from timber production into a marijuana farm, it would be considered a conversion.
And if you converted it into any type of agriculture product, I wanted to put up chicken coops or grow barley, or you'd need that as well. Is there a limit? And this is for my own edification. I apologize.
I think we can explore that a little farther, but I don't think there is. I think if you actually change the use of a property, that you would have to, it would be considered a conversion.
I think we might want to talk more to the Ag Advisory Board as well, because, if we start pulling on a thread for other businesses, unless we want to make an exclusion.
It's just that there were many incidences of people claiming ignorance to this regulation, and they were cited. Over 50 of them were cited for cutting down commercial timber.
In both regulatory ordinances that are before us, there's a lot of work that's going to be required of your department for inspections. Do you feel that our department, our ag department, has the capacity to take on these type of inspections?
Yes, we can do the inspections that we would need to do as far as storage and chemicals. That with the number that we have already seen register, which is over 200, I don't think we're going to have much more than another 200. We might need one person more, or at least make our department whole. Right now, I'm kind of like holding off on hiring a person who I could hire, but I'm thinking down the road, if we have a ban, I might lose a person. I don't want to lose that person. So I'm holding off. So if I can just keep what I legally have in my budget, I should be fine.
Thank you. Well, hopefully we'll clear that up for you today.
Further questions?
Yes.
Mr. Supervisor Mills.
Just to clarify on land conversion, we're talking about taking it out of the ability to be productive as forest and use it for any other use is a land conversion in California. It was interesting that Mr. Freeze also mentioned the amount of grading where they had just balled up the brush and the timber and everything and pushed it into the low country, and it wasn't compacted. So it isn't so much the activity of grading, but it was uncompacted grading then that led to soil runoff into creeks and streams, which created the additional problem. And had this been in the urgency ordinance up front, we had discussed that. How much more could we have saved in terms of some of the environmental damage going forward? This did pass on a unanimous vote of the members of the committee, so it was kind of interesting to have that discussion. I really, as I said, I would have preferred every supervisor to have been in that meeting because it was an eye-opener to really understand the impacts that have been created and what CAL FIRE's been struggling with as a result of and trying to get in front of it. So
Right,
it's unfortunate.
That's why I wanted to bring it up today. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to give more notice to our own administration and discuss it further with them, but I did want it to, because I know that, Dennis, that you couldn't discuss it with your constituents outside of this meeting, so I wanted to make sure that we got it at least.
Mr. Anderson, I have a question, but go ahead, Supervisor Toffenali.
Yeah, Kevin, currently, and I had this conversation with Brian yesterday, and I don't know if he talked to you about what our current codes say about storage of chemicals. Do we have requirements in place?
Yes, there's state laws that are already in place for the storage of pesticides, and what the state law says, it's not in our laws, county laws, but the state laws, which are the laws that I enforce, say that the pesticides must be stored in a locked enclosure.
Enclosure, that's correct. And I read that yesterday. But
So-
it doesn't define what an enclosure is.
It has to be a locked enclosure. And the reason why it doesn't say in a locked shed or a locked house or whatever, you had some other idea on what kind of a structure that might be, but the reason they have it as a locked enclosure is to provide some flexibility to people so that they can, like a pest control business can have it locked in in their vehicle, for instance. And so that's why they say locked
Sure, if
enclosure.
they're pest control and they're going out to homes. And,
Yeah.
Yes.
But from my own enforcement capabilities, we have issued numerous violations to just regular growers for having pesticides stored outside of their shed or empty containers outside of their shed. Most everybody has a shed. It has a lock on it. Whether they actually put their chemicals inside that shed and lock it or not is another situation. But that the law as it stands state-wise is probably adequate for our needs as far as pesticides go. And to remember that it's, the law is specifically for pesticides and it doesn't cover fertilizers. And what I've seen out there in the marijuana grows more often than not is that the fertilizers are maybe left outside. Yeah. There also may be empty pesticide containers, or in some of the illegal grows especially that have been abandoned, there may be pesticide containers left outside. Yeah. But the registered growers who I've seen, which is about 200 that have come in and have talked to us, for the most part, they store their pesticides in a enclosure that's locked, and usually it's a small shed.
Okay, thank you.
But we're not done yet, sir. There's more. Following up on Supervisor Toffanelli's, there are state laws that require the proper storage of certain chemicals / fertilizers / pesticides. And there are commercial storage type cabinets that are fireproof, if you will, fire code identified, depending on the volume of and the quantity of that stored material. So there is a possibility that that could be incorporated into any type of regulation that we look at. Is that acceptable in agricultural? Have you seen that before?
Have I seen agricultural pesticides stored in a cabinet?
Well, it all depends on what's on the MSDS and on storage and what's involved in that particular compound or element, if you will, or pesticide, or whatever, poison, fertilizer. Some fertilizers might require something like that. But there are commercial ways to store that.
Yes.
Okay.
But from my point of view, what my regulation says, when I go on a site, I look to see if the pesticide is stored in a locked enclosure.
Okay.
And we don't handle fertilizers.
I understand.
So unfortunately, I don't know why the law was written where the Ag Department doesn't handle fertilizers, but some place
Go
up at the
figure.
state level somewhere that happened.
But to switch subjects a little bit, to break this down to very basic things, let's say I have a 20-acre plot, and I want to build a barn, and I have oak trees there, and I have to remove these oak trees in order to complete my construction. By your suggestion from the advisory board, you have to have a forester come out. Is that just dealing with cannabis cultivation, or is it dealing with any type of construction? What's our law now? And number two, does it have to be a registered forester or a lumber timber operator, LTO? I know we're running across this in our tree mortality. That's the reason I asked.
I've just received a note that answers that question.
I'll be dying to hear it.
Miraculously. It says on Old Oaks AB 4162 that no one can harvest wood without professional forester inspection
Okay.
submitted to the Department of Fire.
Okay, so I'm going to cut down these trees and use them for firewood and build my shed. Is that harvesting the wood? I'm not trying to play difficult here. I'm just trying to find out where those lines are.
You know, I would say that's probably harvesting wood.
Okay?
But the guidelines for oak trees as far as agriculture goes is that those are for the most part best practices.
Okay. All right, thank you, sir.
Excuse me, but wait, there's more. I think we have to be very careful here. I mean, if we start going after every rancher who decides to cut down an oak tree and start citing them, we already have overgrowth and fire danger going on, so we're trying to encourage people to clean up their lots. If we start citing everybody who's cutting down a tree, and I'm for the oak trees, I just think we should have further conversations outside of a cannabis conversation about the broader context.
Kevin, I think I can help with that.
Yeah.
It's cutting down the tree and still having that land available to grow another tree and keep it in a potential of forest is one thing. But cutting down the tree and now putting up a barn or putting up something that's structurally that you cannot now grow a tree there, that's land conversion. So what we're saying is you can thin all you want as long as you follow the guidelines and you don't create a permanent use that cannot be restored back to a forest condition.
I buy that.
That's the bottom line to it. So,
Okay.
have fun.
Okay.
Thank you. Further staff, any presentation by further staff? Seeing none, this may be an opportune time to take our lunch break, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry. When we get back, if there's no further presentation by staff, we'll go into board deliberation, staff questions, and then we'll have public comment. We're going to be returning 1:30, ladies and gentlemen.